Hi, this is Matt Catley and welcome to our virtual workshop. I'm excited about this. Relationships, the keys to the kingdom. Now, for those of you that don't know me, I think we've had quite a few people join our community in the last couple of weeks. So those of you that don't know me, I wanted to just share a little bit about who I am, what I do, and so you can connect with me and really I hope that eventually, if you like some of our stuff, we might even see you in person in some of our events, because the world has opened up and we're really excited to get our flagship program called Live It Now. Again, Live It Now is a two-day event that I run basically for free. We raise money for charity, Bear Cottage specifically, our children's charity. And it's just my way of getting this information out there, especially personal development information, because it had such a big impact on my life. And so, probably the typical story of a lot of people that get into this industry, they've had some wounds, they've had some challenges. For me, I was quite anxious. I lacked self-confidence, and I thought I couldn't learn, and it was really, really challenging. And my dad, being kind of like my hero, dragged me kicking and screaming on one of my holidays, school holidays, can you believe, dragged me kicking and screaming to this NLP course. And so I'm 12 years old, I'm in this NLP course, and that stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and I'm with all these adults, and I'm spending my school holidays in this program, and it was amazing, actually. And I was sitting there, and NLP is all about kind of psychology, the programs that we run unconsciously. And after listening to this presenter, I was thinking to myself, I've got some pretty interesting programs that are running behind the scenes. And I kind of call those wounds. Wounds, these unconscious wounds or limiting patterns that sometimes we make life decisions from. And the challenge with that is if you make life decisions from your wounds, you'll typically repeat that wound until it gets so big that you kind of wake up out of that trance and you start to make some changes and you commit to a different kind of path, hopefully a true target path instead of a false target. So anyway, that got me started off on my personal development journey. And I kind of didn't stop. I kind of became obsessed, maybe like a few people listening to this. It was about the next training, the next book, and it was really, really amazing. My kind of true voice started to switch on. I became a little bit controversial. You can see my Troublemakers brand. That's one of my companies on the screen here. My principal, that brand came from my principal. He called my group the Troublemakers. And we were kind of like the worst group he thought that had ever come through the school. So I'd been doing all this personal development. I became a bit of a leader. I started to kind of challenge the education system, and it was like, I don't know why we're learning this stuff. It's not relevant. And my voice became a lot louder. Again, from all this work that I did, and that ended up me getting expelled 2 weeks before my HSC. And so, this was the amazing part. Half the school walked out in protest, turned up at my house with cases of beer. We had this big party. So they broke out and wouldn't go back until I was able to do my HSC. And so thankfully, the principal called my mum and said, we've got to get these kids back. We've got to get these students back. So we're going to turn this expulsion into a suspension. And all of a sudden, I was allowed to do my HSC. And that really changed me. I believe, certain moments change you. And that was one of those moments, because we had all of these students that were kind of like at war with each other. And then all of them walked out for a common purpose, which just happened to be me. And I remember watching all these students show up at my house, and I had tears streaming down my eyes. Now, it's an all-boys school, so you don't want to show that you're crying, but it was one of those moments where I felt I was here for people. I wanted to bring people together, create a network, and to really help people break out of those patterns that have been holding them back. So I launched my first business at 19. By the time I think it was 26, I'd grown one of the biggest personal development companies in Australia. We hit the BRW top 100 fastest growing companies. And then I launched a whole lot of other businesses. Your Future Now, as I mentioned, we've got our flagship training, Live It Now, and we've got the Troublemakers. And this is kind of what I'm talking about today, is the Troublemakers. And I love the Troublemakers because it is such a fun brand. And business can sometimes be a little bit challenging. You can be stuck in your business, you can be exhausted, you can be anxious. And I remember when I got this concept of the Troublemakers, I was sitting down with a group of my mates from school, and we'd had a couple of beers, probably a few too many beers, and we're sitting at the Stain Hotel in Manly, and they said to me, Matt, we feel trapped. The first thing they said was, how the fuck did you do what you've done? Like, you weren't an Einstein or anything like that. By the way, I swear, apologies for that. You weren't any Einstein. You weren't that smart. But how have you broken out and created total freedom? Like, you hardly work, you do what you love, and you help so many people. How have you done this? And they said to me, we feel trapped. We feel trapped in our jobs. We feel trapped in our businesses. We feel trapped in life. And in that moment, I got it. And troublemakers are entrepreneurs. Every industry is being disrupted. And what if I could help people, break out of their jobs, break out of their business, and break into life, but replicate that schoolyard? So we catch up, we have fun, we push people into things that they wouldn't normally do. We help them break out, but we have a whole lot of fun in the process. And the Troublemakers was born. And it is such an exciting brand. We run the Troublemakers Network, and it's kind of like a networking process with a difference. One of our big breakfasts that's part of the Troublemakers Network, I sometimes feed everyone espresso martinis instead of their coffee, and then you have everyone out there networking. I do long lunches. We do parties, disruption parties. The last party that we had, people were getting Troublemakers henna tattoos. We have guest speakers. Some of our guest speakers, or part of our Troublemakers network, they're billionaires. They're the top end of town. We've got a Troublemakers Active, an activewear brand. But the biggest thing I think about the Troublemakers is the community, is the fun that we have. And to really flip it, to bring it back to that kind of, that level of freedom that we used to have as kids, to make bigger decisions, to show up in a different way. And I'm so passionate about helping people break out to success. Often what we need to do is, catch up, have a beer, hatch an escape plan, and then look at what your breakout is, whether it is, a breakout, you're a leader and you want to break out, or it's, you're in a job that you're kind of dissatisfied and you want to break out of that. Or you're in a business, and this is kind of what this presentation's about. You're in a business, you're stuck in that business, and it's impacting you. It's impacting your relationships. You might feel anxious, stressed, exhausted. You might feel trapped. I'm seeing so much of this at the moment. And what I've been working a lot with is actually couples. And so a couple that has launched a business together, or it might be one of the partners is running a business, and then the other one's being the supporter. This dynamic is interesting because it can be significantly challenging. In fact, it can take the romance out of the business. Sorry, the romance out of the relationship. The relationship can almost turn into a little bit of a toilet, a dumping ground, where one of the partners becomes almost like a counselor, a support person. The conversation becomes consistently business. And over time, what can sometimes happen is that you can move into a position where you've just become business partners, or it becomes more of a friendship. Now, if you've been on my groups or any of my events, I always talk about this. When the king and queen work, the kingdom works. And so what if we can take a different approach to relationships? And this is where the relationship matrix that I've been working on with a lot of the couples that I've been working with is very, very powerful. And I want to share that with you today. Like, to give you an example, every single couple that I have been working with, and what I mean by couple is they've got a business, and it's either one of the partners is a director, or they're working in the business together. Every single couple that I've been working with over the last 13 months, this is through COVID, are now financially free. And that's using the relationships, that's using the crises, using the setbacks. In fact, yesterday I saw a post with one of my clients, John and Caroline. They have an events business, Jacal Events. This is the third year in a row they've won the or the Australian Bridal Industry Awards. They've won it the third time in a row. A few sessions ago, we were looking at them buying hotels to be able to renovate and create a new niche. This is a couple that, if we look 13 months ago, was really, really stuck. COVID had hit. And it decimated the market. Now, what did I do? I used the relationship matrix approach to be able to help them unlock their authentic power, tap into a new level of leadership, to be able to create space for new ideas and creativity. And then the flow-on effect was this business that shifted into a structure where they created total freedom. And that's what my passion is to be able to take someone that is stuck, that is feeling trapped, and transition them to an experience where they're experiencing total freedom, because I believe that's what we're meant to be. We're not designed to be trapped. Like if you look at kids, and I'm seeing this with my daughter that's 2 years old, she is completely free. She is running around. She goes to different playgrounds. There's no hesitation for her to jump into that playground or community, if you will. She is just overflowing with enormous amounts of energy and excitement. She celebrates the little things, but she jumps into a playground. She instantly engages with other kids that she has never met before in her life. There's no rejection patterns whatsoever. And her energy introduces her. Her excitement, her passion introduces her, and she engages, she has fun. And then naturally, Elsa, she just starts helping people. It's amazing. She helps other kids that are like trying to get up onto one of the play equipments. She helps them up. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, that is the key. We're not designed to be repressing all of this emotion and taking on board all of this stress. It's kind of, we get into adulthood and society projects all of that stuff on us and says, well, you can't be free. You can't have that experience anymore. And I say, bullshit. I say we're designed to be able to do this. And this is what my clients experienced as part of the Troublemakers network. We help you break out back to that experience. And the more kind of work you do when you go back before you take on board these patterns, you discover the key to leadership is actually getting back to that authentic kid inside of you that believes anything is possible, that is highly creative, that makes decisions very, very quickly. And that's actually the key leadership you typically need in your business or your side hustle or whatever it is. So let's get into this presentation, the relationship matrix. It's a little bit about me. Have a look at this. A business will only grow to a certain point before the wound will take you out. So many people don't realize this, is that their relationships are built on a wound, or their business is built on a wound. And this is the thing, is that if your business is built on a wound, it will only go so far before it caps out. And it'll typically cap out in some form of crisis, some form of setbacks, could be relationship dysfunction, and that could be projected into team, projected into personal relationships, can be sabotage, exhaustion, burnout, chronic illness, all of those things. So many business owners are building these structures on wounds. And so the challenge is that you're going to be exhausted. I've trained thousands of coaches now, consultants and experts. And I say to them, if you can't get to the end of the day and feel completely energized and alive and focused, what's happened is that you've triggered, there's something that's happened. One of your clients has triggered one of your limiting patterns or wounds. And that's where we have like the emotional leakage that occurs. So I want you to think about that. If you're a business owner right now, what is this business built on? Is it built on a wound? Now, you probably don't know. And that's my job to be able to help you. And we offer our community breakout sessions. And this is where we can help you unpack all of this stuff. And we do it for free. We're like, let's catch up. Let's hatch an escape plan. And let's do a breakout session. And let's help you break out and uncover some of these patterns. One of the biggest things is that a lot of the time we've got to break out of our limiting patterns, or we've got to break out of our rules, our self-imposed rules. And as we start to do that, we create more flexibility. But have a look at this. A business will only grow to a certain point before the wound will take you out, if it's built on a wound. And the same thing is with relationships. You're seeing wounded relationships at the moment with the enormous amount of pressure that is happening in the world. Unconscious wounds are being triggered because that's what happens with stress. Unconscious patterns that have been laying dormant get triggered, and then we see all of the patterns start to show up. Now, the challenge is that if you are not using the kind of the relationship matrix approach or using this stuff, then often what will happen is burnout, exhaustion, sabotage, or the relationship may end. So this is happening in business, also in wounded relationships at the moment. So the relationship matrix, and I call it the relationship matrix pretty much because of the movie The Matrix. There is another world out there, And what if relationships are the key? What if relationships are almost like the measurement of where you are from a consciousness point of view? And what if also relationships are a vehicle to create consciousness? What if relationships force the evolutionary process, often through crises, setbacks, and conflict? But the challenge is we're not using it within that structure. So the relationship matrix, what we want to be able to do is use relationships as for transformation, to use relationships almost like a mirror to be able to uncover patterns that you would never normally see. Like if you think about it, when it comes to a relationship, if you're triggered and you're majorly triggered, well, that indicates a wound. Now, what do I mean by that? A wound is similar to, like, you know, when you graze your leg and your leg gets, or you graze your knee gets infected. The slightest touch will create a big reaction. Now, if there is no graze, you can hit that knee really, really hard. There's going to be no reaction. But if there is a wound, and often we can pick up these wounds from parents, grandparents, previous generations, all of those things. And as I said, a lot of the time they've been laying dormant until the stress hits. Well, then bang, the slightest touch causes the biggest reaction. You probably had that experience in relationships. But what if these reactions, or what if these triggers are really an opportunity to bring to consciousness things that we would never, ever get? Like I mentioned, is that if you are getting majorly triggered in a relationship, that probably indicates a really, really deep unconscious wound that you have no reality around. Now, that isn't often projected in the same context, i.e., in that same relationship. It may be projected into other areas of life. Like you might be doing that around your health. You might be doing that in other relationships. You might be doing that around your business, or more specifically, a lot of the time, it may be a reflection of your relationship with yourself, how you're treating yourself. So we want to use this. We want to enter this new world, this new relationship matrix, where what if there's no one else out there? What if there is no one else? From a quantum physics point of view, this is what they say. There is no one else out there. Perception is projection. And so for us to perceive another person, it has to be a projection of us. The only way to see certain things, behaviors, belief systems, characteristics, all of those things, must be that we have this stuff at a deeper level, at an unconscious level. And so if we look at the opposite, often we look at the negative side, like this person triggers me, and that's a reflection of me, but it's also the opposite, right? The opposite is that you look at someone, they are amazing. They're a leader, they've achieved some type of success, you look up to them. Now, for you to look at the characteristics, the attributes, the behaviors, for you to notice that stuff, or for you to bring that to consciousness, it means that you've got that. You may not be expressing those patterns at the level that they are, but guess what? You have this stuff. So let's get into the relationship matrix. So when it comes to relationships, if we look at the bottom, we've got you, your partner, say husband and wife, or whatever the personal, intimate relationship is. If there is dysfunction, typically there is a third point. Now, the third point often impacts the relationship. So let's look at the third point. What is the third point that can destroy or kill relationships? Well, guess what? The third point could be a business. The third point could be other relationships. And what I mean by other relationships, it could be the best friend. The best friend. And so imagine this. You're unhappy in your relationship. Instead of telling the truth to your partner, and maybe you don't feel safe to tell your truth to your partner, you go to your best friend and you tell them every single thing that's not working in a relationship. You don't tell them the good stuff. You tell them everything. You debrief everything that is not working. Now, this best friend now has a picture of this relationship that it is terrible, and they've got a mission now to kill that relationship. Okay, so it's always the third point. Addictions also can be the third point. And the addictions can be a suppression strategy, right? Because I feel this emotion and I need to suppress it with food. I need to suppress it or distract myself with TV or self-medication or something along those lines, instead of actually making new decisions, instead of telling my truth or whatever it is. By the way, business can be an addiction as well, where I can hide in that business, distract myself, have an addiction to doing all of those things. So the third point is the thing that we want to look at. And so if you've got your little workbook, I've got some questions for you that I'd love you to do now. So I want this to be, like a workshop that you're actually working in, actually doing something. So if you grab your pens, grab your notebook, let's look at these 3 areas that we're calling the third point. And so if we start off with business, I want you to answer this question. I want you to do it now. Is my business built on a wound? Well, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Is my business built on a wound? So do you have a pattern of overgiving? Do you have a pattern of rescuing? Do you have a pattern of where you feel guilty when it comes to receiving? Okay. Do you have a pattern where there is some type of fear underneath and that is driving you when it comes to be building this business? Are you building this business from towards motivation, which is often passion, excitement, certainty, all of that stuff? Or are you building this business because you feel unsafe? Are you building this business because you feel sad? And remember, sadness is often that I've lost myself. And we can see that in a business where you're helping every other person, but when it comes to you, you're not keeping anything. You're kind of left out of the equation. I've had clients that I've been working with, they've got all of these different structures, and there's all of this revenue coming through the business. And guess what? It's not sticking to them, it's going out. So there is this pattern around, it's not okay for me to receive, or if I am receiving and I have to give it away as fast as possible, or move into some form of sabotage in some way. A mentor once said to me, if true love showed up, could you stay, or would your wounds kind of fuck it up? The same thing is business. If success showed up, could you stay? If an opportunity came up for you to go onto Oprah and promote your business, would you do it? And would you be ready straight away? Or would the wounds come in and kind of sabotage that? That gives us a really good indication. And so then looking at that, that may mean that you're a wounded leader. Are you a wounded leader? Now, how do we look at wounded leaders? We look at, well, what are your decisions when it comes to, from a business point of view? How are you making your decisions? Are you making your decisions from fear, from scarcity, that there is not enough? This can sometimes indicate that there is a wound. Another way to look at this is that, are you stuck in the business? Are you kind of controlling absolutely everything? Are you micromanaging everything? Are you micromanaging other people? Are you suppressing other people? In some cases, wounded leaders, they may unconsciously not want people to grow in the business, because that may mean, oh my God, if they grow, they might leave me or whatever it is. And so we've got abandonment patterns that can show up. If we look at relationships outside of the business, like we talked about the best friend, all of that stuff, personal relationships, are my relationships built on a wound? Do I attract wounded relationships? And what type of wound are you attracting over and over and over and over and over again? Is there a pattern to this? Because remember, like attracts like. There's no one else out there. Even if you've got that pattern, that limiting pattern at like 1 or 2%, you've still got it. So there is a polarity. And remember, energy is magnetic. So you go into a new environment, that energy will magnetically attract patterns. Okay. The next one is addictions. What addictions do you have? Are you addicted to doing, being busy, creating? What happens if you stop? I was talking with another business owner recently, and I said, what would happen if you stopped being busy? What would happen if you stopped creating? And he goes, Matt, I'd go crazy. Interesting. Sometimes there can be this wound underneath that we don't want to experience. So we avoid it or distract ourselves by doing all these things. Self-medication is another example. Are you self-medicating with drugs and alcohol? Are you self-medicating with food, especially when there is crisis within the business? What are your distraction patterns? Are you constantly stuck to your devices, constantly watching TV, whatever it is? And again, what we want to look at is, there's no good or bad. We just want to look at what's underneath this and what's causing this, because all of these things, everybody, are what I call emotional leakages. And that's where we can be exhausted from these patterns. There is this big thing that's happening out there at the moment where people are just so exhausted, they're so stressed, they're so anxious, and they think pushing themselves is going to be the answer. They think, oh, well, if I go for runs, if I eat healthy food, sure, that's going to help to a degree. But what if 80% of exhaustion is mindset? And what if there is emotional leakages that are happening that are just not being dealt with? I often share with my clients a metaphor, which is, imagine you've got this big ship, a big wooden ship, and it's one of those old school massive ships, but the ship's sinking and there's holes in the bottom and it's sinking really, really quickly. And you've got this crew, and imagine like the crew is your unconscious mind. And there's this crew and they've got all these buckets and madly trying to get the water out, but it's kind of not working. They're just keeping their head above water. Sound similar, right? The captain, which is like the conscious mind, just goes, work harder, push more. But there's only so much you can push before full exhaustion kind of sets in. And that's kind of what a lot of people's approach is when it comes to business. If I just work harder, if I just push harder, if I push others harder, well, then what happens is team crumbles, burnout, exhaustion, all of those things. Instead of that, what if you just put part of the team on getting the water out, and then the next part of the team on healing the wounds or healing the leakages in the boat or patching the holes? Well, guess what's going to happen? You patch the holes, the boat's now floating, and then it's going to take less energy to get all of the water out. Suddenly the boat's lighter, it's buoyant. All you've then got to do is point that boat towards a true target. See, most people are on a false target in life. All you've got to do is just point that boat to a true target, and then guess what? Put the sails up. And this is what I find when we kind of shift someone from a wounded leader to what I call an authentic leader, and that's where you're listening to your true voice. It's got louder, so you get on and you make life decisions from that. You get onto a true target. It's all relationships. You bring in, instead of attracting wounded relationships, you attract authentic relationships. The answer's in the third point, everybody. So let's look at the next thing. The approach, the new way, using this matrix, is to look at conflict, to look at crises, and to almost get excited with them, to embrace conflict, to embrace crisis, because guess what? They give us an understanding. They give us an understanding of deeper patterns, or like I said, that boat that has holes in it, it gives us an understanding of where the emotional leakages are. And we can then take the approach of using that crisis, using the setback, using the relationship, or using the addiction, the distraction that is in front of you, to be able to uncover this stuff that we would never, ever get. Imagine life is like a video game. There's different levels, and each level is a different level of authentic power, a different level of freedom. And guess what? The answers are in conflict, crisis, and setbacks, if you're conscious enough. But it's very, very challenging to be able to do it yourself. You need a team, and that's what we do at the Troublemakers. We help people break out of these patterns, break into life. So here's a different approach. And so you may want to write some of these questions down now in your journal, or if you've got the workbook that we gave you. These questions are how we start to uncover these reflections. So the first one, if we look at the business, what wound is being reflected back to me in the business? So imagine the business as a separate entity and it's talking to you, and look at all of the crises that are happening within the business. What's being reflected back to you? What emotions are being reflected back to you? What is the consistent setback that is happening within the business? What's being reflected back to you? What is the consistent crisis with customers? We use also customers as relationships as a mirror to be able to evolve, connect, and grow. Are you attracting wounded leaders in your business? Remember, leaders attract leaders. And how are they a reflection of you? You know, a lot of the time, initially, you're going to attract someone as a staff member that's the wrong person. But we use that. We use that to work out the opposite, which is what you actually want. When it comes to changing yourself, what do you need to do? So look at the business, what's being reflected back to you. Look at your team, what's being reflected back to you. Are you attracting wounded leaders? How are they a reflection of you? And what do you need to change about yourself? The next one is relationships. What are my wounded relationships that are being reflected back to me? And you can answer this stuff now, guys. What are my wounded relationships that are being reflected back to me? And so this is looking at it on a personal level. And we can look at friends, we can look at family members, best friend, like we mentioned. What's being reflected back to you? A lot of people, without doing this type of work, they're naturally focused on what they don't want. You either know what you want or you know what you don't want. Often people that know that are, they know what they don't want, they talk about what they don't want, versus people that know what they do want, talk about what they do want. And so a good indication is that when you catch up with some of these relationships, friends or family members, do they consistently just talk about other people? Do they talk about other people in a limiting way? Well, guess what? That's a projection. Because again, if they're focused on all the negatives about another person, guess what? That can be a reflection of themselves as well. And all of that stuff, everybody, comes from a wound. So the next one is what do these addictions have me avoid feeling? So if there's certain foods that you have an addiction of or binging, what's underneath that? Okay, what's underneath? What are you masking? What do you avoid feeling? And some people, when it comes to addictions like being busy, because it's an addiction to doing, being busy, distracted, they say to me, Matt, oh my God, if I didn't have that in play, I'd be really bored. Let's look what's underneath the boredom. Another one of my clients, this was actually this week that I was working with her, and we found that she'd lost herself completely. She had a pattern where she didn't feel good enough, so she had to consistently prove herself. She had to be pushing. And this was a pattern. We looked at it. This was her upbringing. Her mum had exactly the same pattern. Her mum had lost herself, so she'd lost herself. And so she was constantly trying to get recognition and prove herself. Well, guess what? Mum's lost herself as well. It's not going to work. And so again, the I'm not good enough pattern can be very, very powerful in terms of drive. But what's underneath it? What happens if you stop? What happens if you stop doing? What emotions are below that? Now, for her, it was sadness. Sadness is a reflection, as I mentioned before, of losing yourself. And again, next question is, what action can you take? What action can I take to change all of these things? And so with these reflections, this is going to give you an amazing opportunity to be able to shift your level of leadership. And so from a business point of view, this is where we start to use a crisis. We use the relationships. We use all of these things. We look at where the third point is, because we know if we can shift that third point, we're going to have more energy for our personal relationships. And this is where you can come back into the relationship, and then it is not a dumping ground for the business. You can come back and be present in your relationship, be present to your partner, to be present to your kids. And it's like I mentioned at the beginning, is that when a king and queen work, the kingdom works. A relationship should be a place that is a place to energize you, a place for expansion. A relationship should be a place where you're not walking on eggshells, everybody. There is not a war happening. When the king and queen work, the kingdom works. This is the key. Often the answers are not inside the business. Often the answers are outside of the business, in the relationship with yourself, the relationship with other people, often outside of the business. If we look at kind of the romantic relationship, the cycles that typically happen, the first phase is the honeymoon period. You're both on drugs. You found someone that has kind of suppressed that wound a little bit, and you're both high as a kite, endorphins flowing through the body. You're not seeing the shadow side. The next phase is what we call the power struggle. And the power struggle is where you can't hide that stuff anymore. The shadow is starting to come through. Now, guess what? The shadow is a reflection of them, is a reflection of their patterns, their wounds. So isn't that magic, right? You attract a person that reflects your childhood unresolved wounds. Now, why would we attract that? Of course, consciousnness, to move to empowerment. Now, a lot of people don't get it because they don't do this work. There's incredible technology out there. I created, a coaching system called RCT, Rapid Change Technologies. And part of that process is to uncover the root cause. Where did these limiting patterns start? Because if we can uncover where these limiting patterns start, well, guess what? We can resolve it. We can get back to our authentic power and come back, and we start to live it now. We start to be in present time. And so I want you to really take all of this information, and we have the next opportunity for you, which is if you want to hatch an escape plan, if you want to break out, we have an opportunity for you guys to do that. You'll know this if you're part of our group. One of the options is that we give people an opportunity to have a breakout session, and I'd love to be able to give you that. Let me help you hatch an escape plan and help you break out to a new level of success, a new level of leadership, help you stop that stress and anxiety, help you be able to create a new level of freedom inside where your true voice just gets louder and it gets you on a true target. And the amazing thing is that when you break out of these patterns and you get on a true target, things just start to flow. It's when you're on a false target or making life decisions from wounds, we add complexity. We just keep adding things. But when you transition to a true target, instead of adding things, we just drop things. And the first things that we drop is limiting patterns, is wounds. And so if you would love one of these breakout sessions, please just jump on our group. There is a link on the welcome page, on the welcome announcement. Grab one of one of these breakout sessions. We've got a Calendly link on there. So if you just go onto the group or you just message us, any of us, we're happy to give you guys a breakout session. These are going to be available for a limited time. And these sessions are really to help you, break out of these limiting patterns, break out to a new level of leadership, break out of that job if you want to, or let us help you with a little side hustle. Or more specifically, what my passion is, I love helping people break out of their business, create total freedom, and really run amok. And maybe you want to join me for a long lunch as well, as part of the Troublemakers network or our Troublemakers parties. We've got so much stuff that's happening. But make sure you just join the Troublemakers Network Business Breakout Facebook group. And I'd love to meet you in person. You may want to come to Live It Now. Check out liveitnow.com.au. It's my free event, basically free event. I'm raising money for Bear Cottage. And you may just meet some lifelong friends and transform your life in the process. So I hope you enjoyed this mini workshop today. I hope you got something from it. I really think life is relationships, and we use relationships as an opportunity to be able to expand our life instead of contract. So bye for now. Make sure you make some trouble, and I'll see you soon.